Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Mark Estigarribia here again, Managing Director of MSQ Ventures. We are honored to host Dr. Klaus Trier, co-founder and CTO of THEIALIFE SCIENCES, to our MSQ CEO Founder webinar series. THEIALIFE's 7MX ophthalmology asset is the world's first phase 3 ready novel oral therapeutic for myopia control in children, with post-phase 2 complete plus 12 years of clinical usage in Denmark. Mr. Dr. Klaus Trier, how are you today?
I'm fine, except that you mispronounced my name. It's Trier, to be correct.
Trier, okay.
Yeah, it's okay with Trier, but then you get try harder, Dr. Trier. So I prefer Trier. That's how we pronounce it in my country, which is Denmark.
Trier.
I'm located in Copenhagen, Denmark, the wonderful capital of Denmark. And we are now approaching Christmas, so you have all the feeling of Christmas around here. So I'm very happy to be with you today, Mark, and I'll be very, very happy to introduce our lead project, the oral treatment for myopia, in a minute. And hopefully there'll be many people listening to that because it's worth listening to.
Great. Excellent. I know that, so we have an audience here. We're based in New York City, but our audience is spanning 20 countries around the world. We have a strong presence in China. Good evening, Shanghai. Have you been to China? Have you traveled recently?
Well, definitely have a very long history with China, more than 15 years, because part of the research that led to this treatment was done in China, actually, at the big eye hospital in Guangzhou, the world's biggest, actually. So I have a lot to do with the Chinese researchers and visited China many, many times, many places in China. So
that's great. That's great. So prior to THEIALIFE, maybe a little bit of background. I know that you co-founded the company. Can you please share a little bit of your inspirational journey leading up to THEIALIFE in terms of your background? I know that you founded the Trier Research Laboratories. You were qualified eye specialist, MD from Copenhagen, and chief eye surgeon at Frederiksson Hospital, speakers at many organizations. If you can just share a little bit more of your journey.
Yeah, I'll give you the short version then, because this is something that I've played out over about 30 years now. Even prior to being an ophthalmologist or becoming an ophthalmologist, I was engaged in connective tissue research, and that's how I got the know-how to study this tissue, which forms the back of the eye, the white part of the eye, also called the sclera. So when I became an ophthalmologist, I decided to put these methods to use, doing some research related to the eye. And since the eye consists of around 95% connective tissue, it was highly relevant, I believed. And the most obvious thing to start, of course, was the connective tissue that makes up the back of the eye, which is the sclera. Because we knew then that myopia, short-sightedness, is caused by elongation of the eye, which again is caused by the sclera being too weak. And that has to do with it lacks a certain protein called collagen. So I did initial animal experiments that showed that a certain molecule, a metabolite of caffeine, could increase the concentration of collagen in this tissue. And that was very interesting, because if we had a method to do that, a way to increase the collagen, then we could have something that would work against the constant elongation of the eye. So from that, I got the permission from the Danish Medicines Agency to run a small trial, a phase 2 trial in Copenhagen, and that was published in 2008. And then I asked the Danish Medicines Agency, because the trial was successful, So some of the children who were taking part in the trial, they wanted to continue on the treatment. So I asked the Danish Medicines Agency, how can they do that? And said, that's okay, you can continue with those tablets that we have used in the trial, which were produced by a local pharmacy, pharmacy compounded tablets. And that was fine with them. And they also granted reimbursement according to the Danish health insurance, national health insurance. So from 2009, when they made that decision, we simply continued treating children in Denmark, mainly Copenhagen, and have accumulated a lot of data on this, how it works in the kids for periods of up to 10, 11 years. So we know for a fact that it's safe and it works. And along that line, I had the problem that I needed someone to help me produce the API, which is the active pharmaceutical ingredients, ND10 alias 7-methylxanthine, the chemical name of the compound. And that was a bit of a problem because it's not a commodity. It's not something you can just order from somewhere. It doesn't exist. It's produced in the body from demethylation of caffeine and theobromine, which is something you get with a normal diet in coffee and chocolate, of course. But it's not something that you can just order from somewhere. So first we had to produce a method to get the necessary amount of API for the first phase 2 trial that I mentioned earlier. But then when I wanted to continue using the drug in Denmark, I couldn't source it from Sigma Aldrich again because the price was prohibitive. So that's how I came in contact with Mr. Sandeep Arora, the chairman of BioPlus of Bangalore in India. And that was a stroke of luck, I would say, because he's been very, very helpful with the rest of the project, which I would consider almost the main obstacle to this. Because it's one thing to make a discovery, as I did, but it's a whole other problem to set it up on an industrial scale to be able to produce enough quantities of the API, especially when we're talking about something as huge as this medical need, which actually includes half of the world's population in a few years. Mm-hmm. So together with Mr. Sandeep Arora of BioPlus, Bangalore, India, we continued the treatment. And at some point, Mr. Arora and I decided to set up a separate unit, a company called THEIALIFE, to commercialize this discovery. And that's like 10 years ago or something like that. Mm-hmm. And we moved slowly for one reason, and that was that the original method to produce the API would never work if the quantities had to be in metric tons like we predict it will be soon. Mm. So it was necessary to produce it in a better way, more effective and less polluting way. And that was actually done with the help of a bioengineering E. coli bacteria that was originally developed at the University of Iowa in the US, but later in-licensed by BioPlus and further modified. So now we have a way to produce the API which is clean, and the product is close to 100% pure and so on. So we are set to go now, but you can imagine that such a process, you know, developing genetically engineered E. coli and so on, and upscale that for industrial use, that takes time. So that's the reason why it has taken a lot of time to come to this point, where we are now ready to launch a phase 3 trial to finally get this product on the market and help all those millions of short-sighted children who are out there in the world, especially in East Asia, of course.
Incredible journey. Thank you for sharing. So can you please elaborate on the unique aspects of your first-in-class molecule for treating myopia in children, how it changes the current landscape of myopia management?
Well, it changes the landscape completely. First of all, this is an oral treatment, which is much more convenient for the children to take compared to, for example, eye drops. We know from experience that compliance with eye drops is generally low for chronic treatment, and a tablet treatment would be ideal. We have managed to produce an extended release version of the tablet so we can reduce the frequency of dosing to twice per day, which is also very convenient. And when it comes to other options to address this medical need, there are very few. When we're talking about pharmaceuticals, actually, there's only one alternative, and that is atropine eye drops. But the fact of the matter is that atropine eye drops has not fulfilled the hopes that it could play a role in this treatment. There was a recent, a few weeks ago, or maybe a couple of months ago, a study funded by the US NIH, which showed that 0.01% atropine over 2.5 years, including a washout period to measure the rebound effect, meaning the acceleration of myopia when you stop treatment, where the efficacy was practically zero of atropine, 0.01%. And there was another, that study was published in JAMA Ophthalmology, the American scientific journal. And actually last week, there was another one also published in JAMA Ophthalmology, which showed that even up to 1% atropine eye drops probably has no effect, as it was shown that 10 to 20 years after children had taken atropine up to 1% for up to 4 years, there was no difference between those who had taken the drug and those who had taken placebo. So bottom line, we believe that the efficacy of atropine is low or even zero. And what's more worrying was that the JAMA article that was published last week seemed to show that those children who had taken atropine for up to 4 years, 10 or 20 years earlier, they seem to have a higher frequency of retinal degeneration. And that might have to do with the atropine dilating the pupil so they would get more light into the eye, which may not be healthy for the eye. So to put it in a short way, it's possible that atropine will be approved by the US FDA next year. There's going to be a decision on the 31st of January 2024, because one company, Luma, has submitted an application, but there's no decision as for yet, and we have to wait and see. But in any case, the expectations for the efficacy of this possible competitive to our drug, they're quite low now. And then you have optical devices. That's a whole other story, and we don't see that as a competition because it can conveniently work together with a tablet treatment, of course. And the fact of the matter about the optical treatment is that it works for some time, but the efficacy seems to decrease quite rapidly, and there's no proven efficacy beyond 3 years. And the maximum absolute effect you can get from using an optical device is a reduction of the eye growth, elongation of the eye of about 0.44 millimeters, and that was over 7 years. So then you have to subtract some part. This particular device was so-called orthokeratology or OK lenses, is a form of hard contact lenses that you use during sleep, and then you take it out in the morning. But when you stop using that device, there will be some rebound, as was shown in an article about 7 years ago. So you have to subtract some portion of the effect, meaning that the maximum effect you possibly can get with an optical device seems to be around 0.3 to 0.4 millimeter reduction of the actual growth. And when you translate that into refraction or power of the lens, the corrective lens, it amounts to about 1 diopter less progression of myopia. Now, our target group is the children aged 10 or younger who are starting to develop myopia, because we know that those children are almost certain to develop what we call high myopia, which is -6 diopters or more. And a child that starts to get short-sighted or myopic before the age of 10 is looking at about an average of 5 diopters progression of myopia. So it's easy to understand that even if this particular child uses an optical device, it's possibly going to have 1 diopter less myopia, but it's not going to make much of a difference. And there's no guarantee that that particular child will not progress to high myopia. That's where our product comes in. We need to add something to the optical device, and that has to be without side effects, and it has to be effective. And we have that product. And we believe that once that has been put on the market, it's going to be a tremendous success. We need to run a phase 3 trial, of course, to confirm that the effect is as we have found from the 20 years of clinical use in Denmark. But all the analysis we have done of the data shows that we are quite sure we can predict the effect of the new tablet, which will be the extended release tablet taken twice per day.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Maybe one more question before we get into your presentation, but what are the next steps in the clinical development of ND10, and what timelines are you targeting for future trials and potential market entry?
Well, the duration of the phase 3 trial is still open to debate. We need to have a discussion with the regulatory agencies to determine what exactly, the duration they would like. From the atropine studies, it seems that 3 years will be the normal duration. But from the results we have accumulated here in Denmark, we have calculated that 2-year duration would be sufficient to reach the minimum efficacy requirement set by the FDA, which is a reduction of 0.75 diopters myopia progression, no matter how long time. And that we can reach for sure within 1.5 years, and for sure within 2 years. So it's our belief that we can terminate the phase 3 trial, after 2 years. And that would, of course, speed up the process to get the registration, to get this product on the market. But there's also, it's a huge operation to recruit, together with the CROs, the participants in the trial, to get the approval for the trial and so on. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, regulatory, also after the trial. So realistically, we are talking about 5 years from now. But that will include all the regulatory work and trial and so on. So that's, unfortunately, when we're talking about short-sightedness, we need to observe over quite a long time. As you can imagine, the changes of the refraction are quite relatively slow, and also the growth of the eye. So that's necessary.
Okay, great. I know that THEALIFE is working on a current capital raise, fund rounds to help with the trials going forward. Any interest, questions on that, you can contact us directly or the company. Now, we look forward to the knowledge sharing of THEALIFE's novel approach. We will take questions from the audience in the back of your presentation. Dr. Klaus Trier, please share your screen and start your company presentation.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I hope everyone can see the screen now. Wait a minute, I need to go back. For some reason, we started in the middle of it. But
there we go.
So I hope everyone is able to see the slide.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Then we will move on quickly here. And this is a short introduction to THEIALIFE Sciences. We are addressing the #1 unmet medical need in the world. There are predictions showing that 2050 we will have half of the world's population being short-sighted, and 10% of the world's population will have more than 5 diopters of myopia, which some consider high myopia. For others, it's -6, but that's not important. And the main points I would like to highlight here is that we have currently no approved drug for myopia control. As I mentioned, there'll be a decision on atropine 0.01 January next year. And we can't rely alone on optical devices. They will help, but the efficacy for a young child younger than 10 years when the myopia starts will be probably only 20 to 25%. So we need something to take care of the remaining 75%, so that we can make sure that these children do not grow up getting more and more short-sighted, ending up with high myopia and risking complications later in life that can be sight-threatening, such as retinal detachment and myopic macular degeneration, as well as glaucoma. So that's not to speak of the inconveniences connected with having a high myopia. So here we have the pipeline of THEIALIFE, which, as can be seen, it's not a single product company. We have a lot, actually, of very interesting products in the pipeline, all proprietary molecules that can be developed into big business opportunities. I'm not going to go deeper into that, but just to mention, we have cataract prevention, eye drop for dry eye disease, which has actually already successfully been tested in animal models. And we have the myopia, which is on the threshold of a phase 3 trial now. And we have a molecule that can be combined into a cure for corneal blindness. We have a molecule that can bind metalloproteinases so that keratoconus does not worsen, which makes it a preventive treatment for keratoconus. And we have, very excitingly, a molecule also proprietary, not produced in any other laboratory in the world, that theoretically can do something for neovascular diseases, as it blocks angiogenesis in vascular AMD and pterygium. So let me move on to our main project, which is the myopia project. And here is the article in JAMA Ophthalmology. As you can see, it's quoted on the National Institute of Health's homepage, that low atropine is not better than placebo for slowing myopia progression. So, and then there's the Viluma clinical trial, which is a commercial trial. It shows that the efficacy is low, over 3 years of treatment, it only prevented 0.24 diopters of myopia progression, which means that a child that takes atropine 0.01 every evening for 3 years, after 3 years will only have 0.24 diopters less myopia than a child that takes no treatment. And that's not even counting the rebound effect, which has not been published yet. That's the 4th year of the trial. So we believe that the efficacy of atropine eye drops is too low for making it a popular choice. And we have the mechanism of action of 7MX. We know from animal studies that it increases the collagen at the back of the eye, which is deficient in children who develop myopia. So as you can see, the normal eye will be 24 millimeter length. But if myopia is allowed to progress, it can reach even 28 or even worse than that. There's practically no upper limit to that. A child that's, since 1 millimeter of elongation corresponds to 3 diopters of myopia. A child that's -6, develops -6 diopters of myopia will have an eye that's about 2 millimeter longer than normal. That's 26 millimeter. So we know that it blocks the elongation by blocking adenosine receptors at the back of the eye, and then there's this cascade that makes sure that collagen is built up in the sclera. Here we have the latest analysis of the clinical data from Denmark, and if we take the 6-year effect after a child that takes 1,000 milligrams, which corresponds to 2.5 tablets of the current pharmacy compounded tablet, will have 1.71 diopter less myopia after 6 years, and the eye will be 0.64 millimeters shorter than a child that takes no treatment. And those are children aged from 7 to 10 years at baseline and who have myopia between half a diopter and 4 diopters. If we look at what's happening over 3 years, which is the expected duration of our planned phase 3 clinical trial, a child taking 3 tablets of the current immediate release tablet per day will have, after 3 years, 1.56 diopters less myopia, and the eye will be 0.29 millimeter shorter compared to a child taking no treatment. And as I mentioned, the FDA has a minimum requirement of 0.75 diopters. So we are well above that. And this corresponds to a reduction of average 75%. It depends on age, of course, because as we can see here, children who are younger, these are children aged 7 at baseline, these are children aged 9 at baseline, and these are children aged 11 at baseline. And the lower line of each bundle represents those children who take no treatment. And as you can see, for the younger children, the development of myopia is much faster than for the older children. So the relative effect will be less for younger children than for older children. But on average for this group, 7 to 10 years, we have about 75% reduction of the myopia progression over 3 years. And that's also far above the minimum requirement of the US FDA, which is 30% reduction. And these data were published in the British Journal of Ophthalmology last year. This is an update of that same analysis with more data. So let me move on. We have now this is the British Journal of Ophthalmology article published last year. And this is the review that was published this year in the International Journal of Ophthalmology. This is to compare the efficacy of our product, 7MX. As you can see here, we have taken atropine, the data from the Vyluma study, 90 19% effect. One of the optical devices called the dot lens has 28% efficacy. It would be fair, of course, to say that some of the other devices have up to 50% efficacy, but there's also a difference in the age group. I think the dot lens was tested in younger children than the other lenses. So, and as I mentioned earlier, the younger the child, the more difficult it is to get a higher percentage reduction. And our percentage is, as I mentioned, 75%, even for this young group of children. So we are far above the competitors in this space. This is the roadmap, and we have passed all these stages, and we are now on the verge of starting the application for an investigative new drug. We need to talk with the FDA and other agencies, and then we need to raise the capital for the phase 3 trial, and then we have all the regulatory work that needs to be done. This is the experimental work that was done. Clearly, it works by increasing the concentration and the diameter of collagen fibrils in the back of the eye, in the sclera, the outer wall of the eye. It has been shown to work in guinea pigs, rabbits, monkeys, and a couple of other animals. So the experimental evidence has been reproduced a number of times, and there's no question about the effect. There's also an interesting effect in that the animal study seems to show that the effect of a positive lens, which is the principle of the optical devices, is enhanced by in animals who take 7mx. So that makes it very likely that the combination of an optical device and our drug will work very well together. This is the phase 2 trial that was published 2008, in which we had a placebo-controlled study for the first 1 year, randomized and masked. And then the second year, all the children took 7mx, and the third year, they were all taken off the drug and took no treatment. And what we learned from that is that the effect of one tablet once per day was a reduction of around 0.04 millimeter in the elongation of the eye. And we also learned that there's no rebound effect, it seems. When you stop the treatment, you get no acceleration of the myopia progression, as is the case with other treatments like, for example, atropine and some optical devices. So we believe that there is no rebound effect. Now, this initial trial only tested the dose of one tablet once per day, which is too little, because we know that the half-life of the drug is relatively short. So it should be given 3 times per day, which is what we're doing now to get the more optimal effect of the treatment, even possibly more than 3 times. That we have addressed by producing the extended release tablet. So that will have probably a much better efficacy than the current tablet given 3 times per day. So we are now going to move to the next one. And this is the planned trial, which is separated in, it's a global trial, but it's done in 2 sections. One for the US, Europe, and South Korea and India, and the other one for China, Japan, and Latin America. And we have planned 284 children in each trial, running for up to 3 years, but with a likely unblinding after 2 years, as we expect to achieve the minimum requirement of 0.75 diopters at that point. The target group again will be children from 7 to 10, or in this scheme it's 7 to 12, but we plan 7 to 10. Anyway, we have here the timeline of the whole development from 2004, when the Danish Medicines Agency allowed the trial, and 2009 they allowed continued treatment with the pharmacy compounded tablet, publication of the data in the British Journal of Ophthalmology, and now we have prepared with almost 1,000 or more than 1,200 children treated over the last 20 years. We're ready for the phase 3 global trial. Let me move on. Safety profile is very good. We have done the basic toxicology up to 6 months, and there's nothing to indicate that there's any toxicity of this molecule. We also know that it has a history of use of thousands of years, as it has been taken in the form of caffeine and theobromine for as long. Theobromine was used as an asthma treatment for decades up to around 1960 in Europe, but was abandoned in favor of other asthma medications. But there were no concerns from the Danish Medicines Agency due to the history of use of this molecule, as when you take, for example, theobromine, it will be metabolized in the liver to 7 mx. So you will have at any time a concentration of 7 mx that amounts to about 10% of the concentration of theobromine. So indirectly, we have used 7 mx for a very long time, even thousands of years. We are looking for a raise of $60 million, and that will cover the global phase 3 trial plus the associated regulatory costs. So when we are the $60 million will be sufficient to bring this product to the market. And we have also plans for setting up a US leadership for the global headquarters, and even listing on the NASDAQ is in the horizon. We have solid IP based on the pharmacokinetics data, which has not been published, and based on the manufacturing process of 7mx, which is patented, partly patented, and also partly not published. And we have also the formulation of the sustained release or extended release tablet. That's the presentation. Now I will remove the screen sharing, and I hope you're still there, Mark.
Of course. Listening intently. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Dr. Trier. So let me first let the participants gather their questions, and I'll start. Maybe what I'll do is I'll start. Oh, here's a question. Okay. Dr. Trier, could you please discuss the potential of pathological myopia becoming the leading cause of irreversible vision impairment and blindness, and how THEALIFE's solutions are positioned to address this?
Yeah, I'd like to start by mentioning that if the myopia or short-sightedness starts below the age of 10, as I mentioned earlier, there's a very high risk. It's about 2/3 of those children. They will develop high myopia, which is -6 or -5. Some define it differently. So the high myopia, if you start developing myopia after the age of 10, the risk of getting high myopia is quite low. But for those young children, it's a relatively high risk that they go to high myopia. And once you have developed high myopia, as you can imagine, since it's associated with the eyeball getting elongated, the tissue inside the eye, the retina, will become stretched and weakened. And that will lead to those possible complications later in life, which is development of retinal tears and retinal detachment and myopic macular degeneration. And that's not theoretical. Already now, in some areas of Japan and China, Shanghai, high myopia is already the leading cause of blindness. And as it affects relatively young individuals around the age of 50, it's a very serious matter, because these children will, these individuals will have a big problem if they lose their eyesight at that age, because they're still in the productive age, and they may lose their job and so on as a consequence of losing eyesight. Of course, retinal detachment can be treated by surgery, but not in all cases is the surgery successful. And the same goes for myopic macular degeneration. There are treatments where you inject VEGF inhibitor to prevent the invasive blood vessels from forming underneath the retina. But the treatment is not effective in all cases, and in some cases you will also induce atrophy of the retina if you continue injecting over a number of years. So in some cases you end up with blindness anyway. So I think everyone can agree that it would be better to prevent the children from developing high myopia. Then they will not experience these troubling complications. And the number of children we're talking about millions. As I mentioned, it's 10% of the world's population in 2050 that will develop high myopia, defined as more than 5 diopters of myopia. So some proportion of these, the risk of getting these complications increase exponentially with the degree of myopia. So the higher myopia, the higher the risk. So, and apart from that, for the parents of these children who are developing myopia, in some cases, the progression is quite fast. There's something, they consider it an emergency, because when you're looking at your child, months after months, myopia increases. There's something compelling about the situation. No parent would like their child to develop something that can be avoided if possible. So that's why, also from my own clinical experience that parents are willing to go to almost any lengths to prevent their child from progressing further once they have seen how fast it can actually develop. That can be scary, I would say.
Great. Another question, I think this is on the collagen concentration, high growth. ND10 increases collagen concentration in the posterior sclera. Can you discuss how this impacts eye elongation and myopia progression based on your research?
Yeah, sure. We already know that the elongation rate is related to the concentration of collagen in the sclera, in the back of outer wall of the eye, being too low. And that means that the pressure inside the eye, which we all have, even if it's the normal eye pressure, of course in glaucoma is increased, but in these children there's no increase of the eye pressure, but only the normal pressure of around less than 20 millimeter of mercury will cause the eye to elongate if the quality of the sclera collagen there is too low. That is because the tissue that lacks collagen will be softer than normal. So you can imagine that the pressure inside the eye will cause the eye to elongate, and that's an irreversible process. So once you get the eye elongated, it will stay that way of course, the process will stop once you reach the adulthood around the age of 18, 20 years. There will be a process called cross-linking of the collagen, where the collagen fibrils in the sclera get cross-linked, and that will stop the elongation rate. But then you have to live with that shape of the eye for the rest of your life. So you can't reverse the process. That's why it's necessary to treat preventively. So we know from the animal experiments that we give this 7mx to animals, we increase the concentration of collagen and also the diameter of the individual collagen fibrils in the sclera. And that is why it works. But it doesn't work elsewhere in the body, because the initial effect is not directly on the sclera. It's on adenosine receptors at the back of the eye, possibly in the retinal pigment epithelium or even the choroid. So there's some regulatory effect, a feedback mechanism that regulates the eye growth, and that is controlled by the adenosine receptor and also by another receptor called the dopamine receptor. And these two receptors are built together. It forms a complex. So the receptor molecules for dopamine and adenosine sits together on the retinal pigment epithelium cells. Once you block the adenosine receptor, then you facilitate you upregulate the dopamine receptor. And if you block the dopamine receptor, then you increase the adenosine receptor. So it's vice versa. And that fits very nicely into the theory that dopamine also is capable of preventing myopia progression. And dopamine is released when you are exposed to bright daylight, whereas adenosine is depleted in the retina when you are exposed to bright daylight. When you are in darkness, you get less dopamine released in the retina, but you get an accumulation of adenosine. So that explains why blocking adenosine receptors will work against myopia. We know that children who spend a lot of time indoor will have much higher likelihood of developing short-sightedness. So the recommendation is to go outdoor to play. Problem is that these days, due to indoor lifestyle and a lot of studying, especially in East Asia, children, they don't get much of a chance to get outdoor. So that's probably the reason why these days we see a lot more myopia compared to 1 or 2 generations ago, because children simply spend too much time indoor. So they don't get the amount of daylight they need, and they keep studying, and it's even worse with the digital devices that people are staring at for many hours every day. Right. So of course, we could go back to earlier lifestyle, but the problem is I don't think we will. I think we have chosen this lifestyle and it's going to stay that way. So our job will be to find out a way to protect the children from the consequences of this lifestyle. And this we believe we can do with our products.
Great, thank you. So challenges, opportunities. So what have been the biggest challenges in developing ND10, and what opportunities do you see in the myopia management landscape?
The first part of your questions, I would say the biggest challenge have been the industrial part of the project. Because it's one thing to make a discovery, not that it's easy. I mean, in the laboratory, find some way to increase the collagen and at the back of the eye of the sclera of the rabbit. And then comes the next difficult thing, that's bring it into the clinic. And that happened with the help of the Danish Medicines Agency, which has been very supportive all the way. So that produced the initial clinical results. And then came, I would say, the very, very big challenge of finding a way to produce this API in a sustainable way. And that we also succeeded. I mean, when I say we, THEIALIFE, in cooperation with BioPlus of Bangalore, India, to set up a way to produce this. So we are now able to produce as many metric tons as we need for this global project. So that's the reason why it took 20 years. So it's a long time, but that's how long time it takes to come up with something like this. Because it's not only the discovery, it's also the implementation in the real world. But I'm happy to say that we have done that and we are ready for the next phase. And for the other part of your question, the opportunities, well, we're talking about, as everyone can imagine, a huge opportunity. We're talking about patients or children in need of this treatment in the millions. So as a business opportunity, it's difficult to point at something bigger than this, I would say.
Great. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. So the long-term vision for THEALIFE, beyond ND10, what is THEALIFE's long-term vision in the field of ophthalmology, and are there other promising molecules in your pipeline?
Yeah, I can certainly confirm that. We have the project that I mentioned earlier, dry eye, which is also a huge indication. Keratoconus, it's not as big as myopia, but it's still an unmet need, I would say. We have cross-linking, but that only treats the state of keratoconus. We have something that can come earlier and prevent it from deteriorating. And we have the other drugs for neovascular AMD, which of course is still on the conceptual stage, but we're hopeful that we can develop something there. Pterygium, we have plenty of projects in the pipeline. So actually the plan is to launch the myopia product first, and then following the successful launch of that, to go into to develop the other assets that we have. And they're all proprietary and can be developed into huge business opportunities as well.
Great. Well, I think that concludes our webinar. I want to thank you, Dr. Klaus Trier, for sharing THEALIFE's novel oral therapeutic for myopia control in children. If anyone has any questions or interest in THEALIFE, specifically in the fundraise opportunity, please contact us here at MSQ, and we will make sure to connect you with Dr. Klaus Trier and management. Again, THEALIFE's 7MX ophthalmology asset is the world's first phase 3 ready novel oral therapeutic for myopia control in children. It's completed its phase 2 plus 12 years of clinical usage in Denmark. Congratulations, Dr. Trier, on your discovery and all accomplishments to date. We're excited and eager to see THEALIFE's achievements and future milestone accomplishments. Any last words before we conclude, Dr. Trier?
Well, no, only thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure to be with you and the audience today. And I hope and I'm sure that we'll get a lot of positive response, as we already have had during this process. So I'm looking forward to that. Thanks.
Of course. Well, thank you everyone for your interest today in THEALIFE and in MSQ CEO Founder Webinar Series. Have a great day, night, happy holidays, and an early Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thanks.